Is God dead? These words, which once appeared on the now infamous Times magazine cover, remain one of the most iconic cultural moments in our modern history, exemplifying for many what seemed to be the culmination of a centuries-long shift in technological, scientific, and philosophical progress, the death of God. Many in North America today would likely reply to the question with a resounding yes. There is no question that one of the most alarming statistics characteristic of younger generations in the West is their abandonment of the church, religion, and other traditional practices associated with it. One study found that roughly 45% of Gen Zers rarely attend church, with 1 out of 10 identifying as atheists. Add to that a huge cultural shift in what is considered acceptable and even praiseworthy for the young. It doesn't take a long look into the kind of content that is peddled and promoted by popular media to acquire a taste for the ideological leanings of our younger generation.
What is the truth?
Nothing matters.
No, Joy. You don't believe that?
Feels nice, doesn't it? If nothing matters, then all the pain and guilt you feel for making nothing of your life goes away.
And yet, Gen Z is a very peculiar generation. We are a generation that is restless. We are a generation that clearly pursues justice, even if our definition of justice is questionable. While older people may paint our generation as lazy, incompetent, and incoherent, the truth is Gen Z is clearly displaying a need, a desire, and an urge to find something very profound. Meaning. Video essays have been the subject of a lot of internet memes and have been subjected to a lot of critical scrutiny. And perhaps rightly so. Yes, sometimes the topic of conversation of video essays is really convoluted, and sometimes video essayists take topics and delve a little bit too deeply into them. But I've noticed a certain trend with a lot of video essays, which is that a lot of them seem to endeavor to answer one particular question. Whence is meaning? How do we find meaning in our lives? How do we derive purpose out of our existence? However, the answers are often disappointing. Oftentimes, these video essayists, clever as they may be, draw on the work of people like Camus, Sartre, or Nietzsche. And these young creators sit in front of their cameras on YouTube and boldly declare things like,
"Life is meaningless, sure, and the only rational course of action is to behave as such."
Nothing actually matters. The phrase has become a really edgy one. I think it's something that we hear repeated a lot in our popular culture, either in edgy philosophy video essays online, or in the media, or in TV shows, or on Instagram. But it is a claim that I don't think a lot of people truly grasp. I do think that the online community is a little bit monolithic in terms of the answers that online creators have provided. And I would like to offer a different perspective, which is this. The death of God, a view that has been so widely accepted in our popular culture, is not exemplary of the progress of science, reason, or philosophy. Rather, it actually really does entail the death of meaning, and the consequences of this death of meaning are a lot more drastic than most people think.
Är det så grymt otänkbart att fatta Gud med sina sinnen? Varför lever han vidare inom mig på ett smärtsamt och förebyggande sätt, trots att jag förbannar honom? Men ibland är det som det inte fanns någon där. Det kanske inte finns någon där. Då är levandet en orimlig fasa. Ingen människa kan leva med döden för ögonen och vetskapen om alltings intighet. De flesta människor reflekterar varken över döden eller inte. Men en dag står du ju ändå på livets yttersta näs och ser mot mörkret. Ja, den dagen. Jag förstår vad du menar. Vi måste göra oss ett beläte av vår rädsla. Och det belätet ska vi kalla för Gud.
One of the most cited resources on the death of God is none other than Friedrich Nietzsche, who popularized the phrase in his book, The Joyous Science. In it, he offers a scathing criticism of religion, morality, and other Christian precepts that have been inherited in our Western intellectual tradition. And he does so in order to usher in a new age of humanity, one that is marked by the death of God. However, this phrase by Nietzsche is often misinterpreted by a lot of people to be some sort of tongue-in-cheek winning declaration, like as though Nietzsche is super happy about it. However, Nietzsche probably would have taken issue with the demeanor and the rhetoric of a lot of modern-day atheists. In fact, he likely would have criticized them as shallow, hypocritical people who were incapable of holding to the logical consequences of their conclusions. Take this quote from The Gay Science, for example. It's commonly referred to as the parable of the madman. Now, before I read it, I want to let you know that it is a long quote, but I do think it's worth reading in full because of just how powerful and moving this passage is. Have you not heard of the madman who lit a lantern in the bright morning hours, ran to the marketplace, and cried incessantly, "I seek God, I seek God." As many of those who did not believe in God were standing around just then, he provoked much laughter. "Has he gotten lost?" asked one. "Did he lose his way like a child?" asked another. "Or is he hiding? Is he afraid of us? Has he gone on a voyage, emigrated?" Thus they yelled and laughed. The madman jumped into their midst and pierced them with his eyes. "Whither is God?" he cried. "I will tell you. We have killed him, you and I. All of us are his murderers. But how did we do this? How could we drink up the sea? Who gave us a sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What were we doing when we unchained this earth from its sun? Whither is it moving now? Whither are we moving? Away from all suns? Are we not plunging continually? Backward, sideward, forward, in all directions? Is there still any up or down? Are we not straying as through an infinite nothing? Do we not feel the breath of empty space? Has it not become colder? Is not night continually closing in on us? Do we not need to light lanterns in the morning? Do we hear nothing as yet of the noise of the grave diggers who are burying God? Do we smell nothing as yet of the divine decomposition? Gods too decompose. God is dead. God remains dead. And we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off us? What water is there for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred games shall we have to invent? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? There has never been a greater deed, and whoever is born after us, for the sake of this deed, he will belong to a higher history than all history hitherto. Here the madman fell silent and looked again at his listeners, and they too were silent and stared at him in astonishment. At last he threw his lantern on the ground, and it broke into pieces and went out. "I have come too early," he said then. "My time is not yet. This tremendous event is still on its way, still wandering. It has not yet reached the ears of men. Lightning and thunder require time. The light of the stars requires time. Deeds, though done, still require time to be seen and heard. This deed is still more distant from them than most distant stars, and yet they have done it themselves." I mean, wow. Nietzsche is saying in this parable with this prophet that is running into this marketplace that God is dead, but the people who are listening are unaware of just how drastic, just how earth-shattering it is. Not only does it signify the death of centuries of philosophy, but also the institutions and the practices that have been embedded in our civilization as a result of that belief in the divine, in order, in purpose, in human rights, in dignity, in God. The fact that Nietzsche believed that the death of God entailed really, really big consequences for society is exacerbated by another quote of his in The Gay Science. He says, "After the Buddha died, people showed his shadow for centuries after in a cave, a monstrous and unearthly shadow. God is dead, but given the ways of men, perhaps for millennia to come there will be caves in which his shadow will be shown, and we still have to subdue his shadow." In the modern day, belief in the supernatural is largely discounted as nothing more than anti-intellectual mysticism. More and more people are abandoning belief in the supernatural for a naturalistic view of the world, one that asserts that fundamentally all that exists is physical, natural, matter. And yet, while Nietzsche vehemently rejects all of the metaphysical doctrines inherited from Christianity in the Western intellectual tradition, he is adamant that every part of this metaphysical doctrine has to be erased. And Nietzsche's list of what that includes is likely a lot bigger than your average modern-day atheist. And these people are people who say that life is meaningless and nothing really matters, and they continue on their merry way and act as though their lives really do have meaning, and that things like truth, goodness, beauty exist. But Nietzsche would say that this is absurd. If you want to say that God is dead, and if he truly is dead, then we also have to subdue his shadow. We have to erase everything that came with him. You have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And Nietzsche, well, he goes on to state everything that includes later in the gay science. He says, this order, the order of the world, and the considerable time which it requires has again made possible that exception of exceptions, the development of organic life. The overall character of the world, however, is from all eternity chaos. Not in the sense of a lack of necessity, but rather in the sense of a lack of order, structure, form, beauty, and wisdom, and whatever else our aesthetically attractive human qualities are called. The point is clear. If God is dead, then so too is any notion that this universe is purposeful, ordered, and structured. The emergence of organic life is nothing more than a fluke, the minutest of all possibilities. And all of those other things that we're so accustomed to recognizing, in fact, even praising, beauty, goodness, wisdom, truth, all of that is nothing more than the deposit of a long evolutionary process. It's nothing more than an illusion that we've believed in order to prolong the survival of our species. But true, it is not. As scholar and theologian Carl Trueman puts it, it is thus polite atheists, not religious believers, whom the madman first engages in the town square, those who wish to have their comfortable, stable, secure lives even as they have removed any foundation on which they might build such. Where then does that leave us? Where does it leave humanity? Where does it leave such commonly held notions such as the importance of justice, the existence of human rights, the absolute immorality of murder? Well, it leads us down a path of a complete denial of the existence of any such things. Indeed, it leads us down a path of complete cognitive dissonance.
Rupert, please. So what? Listen to me. Just listen. Let me explain. Explain? Do you think you can explain that? Yes, to you I can. Because you'll understand. Understand? Rupert, remember the discussion we had before with Mr. Kentley? Remember we said the lives of inferior beings are unimportant? Remember we said, we've always said, you and I, that moral concepts of good and evil and right and wrong don't hold for the intellectually superior. Remember, Rupert? Yes, sir. Well, that's all we've done. That's all Philip and I have done. He and I have lived what you and I have talked.
Philosopher and evolutionary biologist Michael Ruse takes Nietzsche's views to the next logical conclusion. All of morality is nothing but an illusion. He says, thanks to our science, we see that claims like, you ought to maximize personal liberty, are no more than subjective expressions, impressed upon our thinking because of their adaptive value. In other words, we see that morality has no philosophically objective foundation. Let me repeat that again. Morality has no philosophically objective foundation. It is just an illusion fobbed off on us to promote biological altruism. In detaching ethics from metaphysical justification in God, you're left with a plethora of absurdities. One of the most common theories that has been promulgated since the Enlightenment and post-Darwin has been an ethical Darwinian naturalism, which maintains that our theories of right and wrong are just the consequence of a long evolutionary process. Behavior which promoted survival and aided in natural selection was favored as good, and then we get notions such as don't kill or steal. Ruse terms this as biological altruism, tendencies to do good at one's own expense, which really just serves a larger biological end. The fact of the matter is, if nothing truly matters, if all ethical, religious propositions are nothing more than sophistry, with no grounding in objective reality, then you're left with a Rusian morality. Darwinian evolution has no fixed absolute direction. We have evolved one way to get our particular set of moral beliefs. We could have evolved another way to have a different set of moral beliefs. Really, one is as good as the other. Really, one is as good as the other. Thus far, we have established the following. First, that our modern age is characterized by a shift away from theism in Christianity towards a naturalism which rejects all miracles and all appeals to anything objective, transcendent, rooted outside of material reality. And this would include the complete eradication of all ethics, aesthetics, and value judgment. Now, we live in a world of facts. Facts which are scientifically and empirically measurable. Ethics, religion, meaning, purpose, aesthetics, and all of that other superstitious hogwash, God's enduring shadow, has been cast out to the realm of value. Nothing but subjective preference claims. Second, we have established that God's enduring shadow includes a lot of really important aspects of common sense human experience, including our desire for meaning, purpose, belief in truth, and in an objective right and wrong. Naturalistic accounts of morality as nothing more than a long evolutionary process, such as Michael Rousse's, take the death of God to the next logical conclusion. There is no objective right or wrong, and any belief in such a thing is nothing more than an illusion of evolution, which could have evolved in any way. If we evolved to prioritize killing over communitarianism, then that would have been just as good, because evolution prioritized it. Really, one is just as good as the other. So, we covered all that I think is entailed by the death of God and the death of meaning. But where does that leave us? And where does that leave us with our inherent sense of longing for desire and meaning and purpose and for right and for wrong and justice? Well, it is in fact this desire to have meaning and purpose, God's enduring shadow, that Albert Camus says is the reason why we feel like life is absurd. Camus says that it is this desire for a meaning that clashes with the world's lack of a response that produces feelings of absurdity. So Camus' conclusion? We have to come to terms with it. We can't expect the world to show us some fixed, objective conclusion, some way we need to live in order to find meaning and fulfillment in our lives. That's because the world has no structured meaning. It has no inherent purpose at all. So the world objectively makes no sense and has no meaning at all, but we can just reorient our perspective and embrace it and come to terms with it and imagine that Sisyphus is happy. Okay, yeah, that sounds fine, I guess, just accept the absurd. But what does that really look like? What is the conclusion of it? How do we live that out? What is man left with other than himself and his own emptiness and the fact that literally nothing matters? Yuval Noah Harari, the author of *Sapiens*, puts this worldview pretty well in saying, as far as we can tell from a purely scientific standpoint, human life has absolutely no meaning. Humans are the outcome of blind evolutionary processes that operate without goal or purpose. Our actions are not part of some divine cosmic plan, and if planet Earth were to blow up tomorrow morning, the universe would probably keep going about its business as usual. As far as we can tell at this point, human subjectivity would not be missed. Hence, any meaning that people inscribe to their lives is just a delusion. What do you get when you mix the human condition, which is characterized by an enduring desire for meaning, justice, and purpose, with an anthropology that essentially denies all of those things, and which likens man to nothing more than, well, chemicals and biology? You get a crisis of meaning. Thus, we get confusion in schools. Thus, we get the sexual revolution. We get protests after protests. We get political theater. We get murder. We get social and cultural chaos. We get high depression and suicide rates. We get people applying to be euthanized by their government, pleading the justification that they suffer from loneliness and isolation. We get a culture that is absolutely fixated on the visual, on temporary pleasure, on status, on money, and on appearance. Tell me, if nothing really matters, and if meaning is an internal activity subjectively determined by each respective individual, then who are you to object to somebody else's meaning? On what ground can you object to Hitler's meaning? On this view, the meaning that Mother Teresa inscribes to her life is just as valid as Hitler's. And to declare otherwise is to arbitrarily appeal to some societal construct or personal bias without any objective justification. So how do you expect us to live purposeful lives if everyone, everywhere, is telling us that our lives are the very opposite of that? And do you really expect that our complicit acceptance of that conclusion is going to make the experience of living any better, any more palatable? If to accept absurdity means to accept a proposition in terms of belief, that would entail accepting all of the conclusions that are entailed by the premises. And that means acting like you believe what you say. Otherwise, if you don't, you're either 1, a hypocrite, or 2, you don't actually believe what you say you believe. So which is it? Are you a hypocrite, or do you secretly not believe? Because if this grand theory, that nothing matters is true, then why all of the uproar about social justice? Why all the dissatisfaction with the world today? If nothing matters and there's no objective right or wrong, then how could you say that our society has progressed or regressed? According to what moral standard? These beliefs, which have been so embedded into our worldview as Westerners, it's going to be very hard to weed them out of society. But rest assured that if you kill the root, the rest of the plant will die as well. Christianity is the root of our belief in human rights, in dignity, absolute right and wrong. And if you kill that root, if you divorce our society, academia, and the Western worldview away from its metaphysical foundation in a belief in God, then you will get a crisis of meaning. And ultimately it leads to exactly where you think it leads. Nothing.